think we're motivated to do mission work now. Thank you, Joey. Appreciate that very much. There are a couple of people I want to introduce you to. Part of the work here of the Center for Missions Training and Information is sponsoring a scholarship for foreign students to come to this university to study and to go back to their homes and lead churches, and ideally not only lead churches but direct schools to train other people to do there what we are trying to do here. And I want to introduce to you tonight, for those of you who haven't already met them, the first scholarship recipients of that, who are sitting over here, Neil and Miriam Imperado. They're from the Philippines. And Neil, if you would come up, I didn't ask you to do this before, but just say a few words. Neil and Miriam are from Cebu, the Philippines. Neil's father, Ruben, is a director of a preacher training school there now. Neil is enrolled in a master's program. He's in my Greek class, actually elementary Greek, and actually Miriam comes with him as well, and they're both excellent Greek students, so I'm proud of them for that. The plan is for them to be here at Heritage for a couple of years, finish the master's degree, and go back to Cebu and help with the school and churches there. And Neil, if you would just say a couple of words about your preparation before this point and what you hope to do when you get back to the Philippines.
Sorry, I'm not prepared to give a speech tonight. I was not expecting to be in front of you, but I'm always ready to give a short description or brief background of what we have been doing in our country. So, to start with, I came from an island in the Philippines called Cebu. It's in the middle of a country, so if you know the map or if you look at the map of the Philippines, you can see our island is in the center of the country. So my father was one of the pioneers in building a congregation in our island. At first, there was only one preacher there. It was Dominador Bello, who came to Cebu about, I think, in 1970s, and he was the one who started working to have a congregation in our island. And then my father was studying in Philippine Bible College, which is in Baguio City. So after his graduation, he went directly to Cebu without any support from anybody. So he just wanted to go to Cebu to help building congregation there. So he went to Cebu with my mother, and we grew up in Cebu, and right now it's already about 20 to 30 congregations there, with the brethren helping and all over the island. So before we came here to Heritage, my father mentioned to me that if I'm interested to continue or to study in a Bible school. At first, I was not mindful about it, but then, so I went to Singapore to work. But when my contract expired, I went back home, and then when I came, my father, who also just came here in the United States, he asked me again if I'm interested to study in a Bible school. So I think about it, and I asked Miriam about it, and we prayed about it for a couple of months, and we have lots of struggles thinking about it. And that time I had a dream, and in that dream God has given me a clear mind, and with that I have agreed to my father that I will study in Heritage to help him in his legacy to train preachers in our country. So that is my goal in studying here, to study hard, and then when I come back to our country, I will be able to help my father with his ministry in training and teaching preachers, both young and old. So that is all I can say right now.
Thank you very much, Neil. Neil already has a finance degree from a school in the Philippines. Miriam has an engineering degree from a school in the Philippines, and so they're both highly intelligent. We're proud to have them here at Heritage, proud that they are in our, Neil is in our master's program, and look forward to the work that they will be doing in Cebu in the coming decades. Proud to be able to be associated with them. We're going to take a break at this time, a few minutes, go visit the restrooms, have some snacks, and we'll reconvene for our next session in just a few moments. And get started for our next session. Let me tell you what's going on later this year as well. We appreciate your presence here tonight. This is the first of our seminars. There is going to be another missions seminar on November 18th. It'll be structured very much like this one. And the topics for that seminar, and that, again, November 18th, starting at 6 p.m., the topics will be world religions and cultures, and then missionary field assessment and selection, which are perhaps fancy titles for, first of all, learning about world religions, and then how to select where you want to go in the mission field. What factors should come into your decision there. That's November 18th. Again, it'll be structured like this, a mission seminar starting at 6 to 8:30. We also want to be sure that you know about our China Forum, which is going to be somewhat like this, except much bigger, and it will be focused on China, missions in China, and that will be September 22nd through the 24th. And so it will be one that is multiple days, start Monday night, ending Wednesday morning. Many speakers are already lined up to talk about mission work in China, what is going on in China right now in terms of mission, what people's plans for the future are, what factors we need to be thinking about in spreading the gospel in China, and what the future might hold. And so that will no doubt be an excellent, informative discussion where a lot of ideas can be shared about the best way to go about China mission work. That is September 22nd through 24th. So make plans to attend those seminars. I mentioned a little earlier that there's an opportunity for a certificate program associated with our center. If you want a certificate, and I might say that having a certificate from our program is great for your resume. I mean, we've already heard about padding the resume through mission work, so it's great for the resume. And if you want a certificate, you will want to sign up for it. This will count as part of that certificate program, this seminar tonight, so you'll want to sign up for that. And there are some sign-up lists in the back. if you are interested. And this is for, especially for Heritage students, but also for members of the community. You don't have to necessarily be officially associated with Heritage to enroll in a certificate program. The program is designed to help you learn more about mission work and experience mission work hands-on, go on trips, raise funds, report to elders, and all that goes into mission work. So it would involve these seminars. It would involve actually going to a foreign field as well. If you're interested in that, again, you can ask some of us for more information, or go ahead and sign up on the back. Right now we're going to have a session by Wayne Barrier. He is going to talk about family preparation for missions. After his session, we're also going to have a panel discussion on that topic that should be very informative and interesting. And so that will conclude the program this evening. But right now we'll have Wayne Barrier talk about family preparation for missions.
Before I get into this, there's a book back there that looks like this one right here. It's called Missionary Training Manual. That most of the things that we talk about are in this book. It's the best book I've ever seen on mission program planning and preparation. It's written by Wayne Barrier. So if you'd like to have a copy, we've got them discounted down to, we'll pay you $5 if you'll take one. There's a bunch of them back there. Seriously though, if you want a good checklist and a little bit about most of the things you need to know, it is in this book, and most of my remarks will come from what we've got in the book. There's probably more failure in efforts to do mission work because of family problems than anything else. It's often the case, and this is true of preaching in general, but especially in mission work. You have a man who's very, very motivated and properly motivated and has a great desire to be involved in a work, and ignores the rest of the family's attitude about it, and launches off into a work and fails because the wife and children can't handle what has to be done. And of course that results in a lot of losses, a lot of time wasted. Usually a person is completely demoralized. Sometimes it'll ruin the preacher's career even, get them down to the point that they can't do anything. So the family preparation is one of the most important things that you need to deal with and address and understand if you're going to do mission work. But even before that, Joey talked tonight about probably one of the most important things, and that's motivation and being properly motivated. If you're thinking about doing mission work, let me just start there with this. Get this, make sure this motivation thing is right. And if it isn't, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do mission work. It just means you need to start examining yourself and maybe doing inventories and identifying areas that are not exactly what they ought to be in your own faith, in your own life. And there's still hope for you, but you got to have this motivation right. You got to be properly trained. When I first started working in missions, I traveled with an older missionary for 10 years. And I made trip after trip with Brother J.C. Choate. And he had been in the mission field probably when I started traveling with him for over 30 years. And as I traveled with him, I did whatever he asked me to do, and I kept my mouth shut most of the time as far as trying to give any direction whatsoever to what was being done where I was going. I wanted to learn. And I traveled with him for 10 years, and I made many, many trips and lots of places. And of course, I did a whole lot of preaching and a lot of teaching at his direction. But as I accumulated those years traveling with him, I was so thankful that I didn't do things that I kind of had an inclination to do, maybe the year before or the year before that. I could see the mistakes that I almost made as I got more and more years behind me. And I was just so thankful that I guess JC told me when I first started traveling, you just be quiet and learn from me, and that helped a whole lot. But I learned a whole lot from him that you just can't hardly get anywhere else. And I guess one of my points on that is it took 10 years. It took 10 years for me to get to that point where I could kind of launch out on my own, felt comfortable launching out on my own. Now, you don't have to do what I did because I did get to a point where I put a whole program together, and we have a pretty big effort that we have underway today, and we direct it, and it goes well, all of that. You don't have to do what I did in that sense, but if you're going to work, if you're going to get started, you really do need to do whatever it takes to learn. And if it means traveling with somebody for 10 years, or if it means going through our training here and then making several trips, then do that. You really, really need to have that good preparation yourself. You need to make sure that when you involve yourself in any kind of a mission effort, that you evaluate that effort and make sure it's a productive effort. Joey referred to the fact that we have thousands and thousands of trips made every year by teenagers and real young adults, maybe one making their first or second or third trip, week-long trips here and there, and that a whole lot of mistakes are made in doing that. And if you're going to make a trip, make sure you are doing something in a good work. Make sure that's a well-organized, well-thought-out, well-planned, comprehensive work. And if you go and your job is to teach for a week or 2 weeks or whatever, and that's a part of an overall thing, that's good. But I see all the time people going on trips and they have no idea what they're going to do. They're going to some place and they're going to kind of make an assessment of what they ought to do when they get there. Don't do that. Don't involve yourself in those kinds of things. And unfortunately, I see more of that than I do well-planned things. So before you ever move forward in terms of committing to doing mission work, understand what it takes to have an effective, efficient, comprehensive work that will result in the borders of the kingdom spreading in a very meaningful, effective way. Don't start if you're not going to do that. Understand responsibilities. Joey talked about travel. Mission work travel is hard. He talked about those headaches. I had headaches that I couldn't, I wish I could cut my head off, I'll just tell you. And it's not as bad now. I don't know what happens. As I've gotten older, they've gone away. Maybe Stephen can tell me why that's happened. But anyway, travel, it can be very, very hard. You need to understand that. The environment you're working in can be very, very difficult. There are a lot of risks associated with mission work. Joey, I don't know. Where's Joey? Joey went to China last fall, and he came within probably a day of maybe never coming home again. That's how close he was to being arrested and taken into custody by Chinese military intelligence. And it would have taken forever and a ton of time and money and maybe never gotten him out of there. There are risks, and some of the places where we need to be going are some of the places with the very highest risk associated with it. And sometimes the way to do the best job, the most effective job, means you have to take those kinds of risks. And so if you're thinking about mission work, you're going to be taking risk. You're going to be putting yourself in harm's way, and that's something you need to consider. You need to think of it in terms of long-term commitment. I talk to young people a lot as we visit congregations and or in other places where we interact with young people. I have lots and lots of young people say, well, when I finish over at Freed Hardeman or wherever they're going to school, Heritage, I'm going to go to the mission field for 3 years, and then I'm going to begin my preaching career. I think that is probably resume building is what that is. I really don't like that. And I know that a lot of people encourage that. And I think a lot of congregations trying to hire preachers think that's a positive thing on a resume. But I don't think it is. I don't know that you can do very much in 3 years. I don't think that that's a strategy that'll be effective. We want long-term commitments. We want somebody to say, to look at Mongolia. That's a country in the world today, by the way, where we need a mission effort to take place. To look at Mongolia and say, okay, I'm going to learn all about that culture. I'm going to learn about the government requirements to go there. I'm going to determine whether or not you can work there if you don't know the language, only knowing English. What's their religious background? Study that country and decide I'm going to go to Mongolia, and I'm going to spend the amount of time that it takes for every person in that country to hear the gospel. That's what you need to do. And if I have to spend the rest of my life doing that, then that's what I'm going to do. If I have to beg for money to get a school started there, that's what I'm going to do. And I guess what I'm doing is I'm trying to tell you that if you're going to do this, prepare yourself and make sure your preparation's good. And mission work is hard work. It's really, really hard work. But it is unbelievably rewarding. It's just, I can't tell you how much joy that I have experienced in the 30-something years that I've been involved. I can't tell you the personal sense of achievement and satisfaction that you can have if you're involved in successful missions. And missions is a word that we've come up with. That's not a Bible word. It's really evangelism in places in the world where you have to go on a mission to do it. That's what we're talking about. Places where people have never heard. It's amazing when you go to places like Burma, Joey was talking about, and you see those masses and masses of people bowing down to those idols, and you see people that can't feed their families dropping their money in those boxes in those temples where the government has spent millions and millions of dollars putting gold on top of them. It's really rewarding when you see those people turning away from that and turning to Christianity, and all of a sudden they're taking care of their families, and all of a sudden their moral code and their outlook on life is different. As you see them develop and become disciples that to walk in the steps of Jesus and the effect they have on people around them, it really makes a big difference in how you feel in so many different ways. And so before you even decide that you're going to introduce your family to all of this, make sure you get your head right. Make sure you understand what you're going to be doing. It takes a lot of study. It takes, if a program is run well, it's going to have competent leadership. You're going to have to make intelligent actions. I've seen and heard of mission programs where a person goes to a foreign country, maybe the first one ever to go there, And in the first week that they're there, poison the opportunity to be successful in that place until an entire generation of people die. Just one mistake made. So you have to approach this very, very carefully and intelligently. Full-time work doesn't mean that you have to be located. You know, 100 years ago, most of, quote, mission work was people moving to a foreign country and living there the rest of their life or for a period of time and doing and spreading the gospel. But with travel like it is today and communications like it is today, you can have a full-time work and live right here. You know, Janet and I, when we get home tonight, she'll go to the computer and look at our emails, and we'll have emails from 12 or 14 different countries from people that we work with. There's about 30 people that work with us in foreign countries that are kind of field directors of what's going on in those countries. And we'll have communications from those people, and that's every night. And so she'll be up and we'll be up working together until midnight or so trying to respond. And we deal with everything from, we had a big rain today and the retaining wall broke and flooded the classrooms of the church building to one of our children is about to die with this disease or that disease. You cover the whole range of things. Or what do you do when you're having to deal with people that believe this or believe that? You can actually interact day by day today with people who are working with you. If you set your work up in a foreign country where you have a field director and you have a network of people, and it takes time to do that. You can't start out that way. But you can run a big program. I mean, we're involved with a lot of different countries. We see we actually distribute millions of pieces of literature every year. We see 3,000-4,000 baptisms a year that come through our things. We train 500 to 600 people a year in all of our schools scattered across the countries where we're working. And I spend less than 3 months a year in the field. But if you add my 3 months and Joey's time and Jeremy's time and Robin and Justin and Dr. Christian back there, and you can just go on through the whole group of us, there's 12 or 14 of us, then we actually are in the field a lot. But you can actually have a work that's run from here. So when we start talking about family preparation, you don't necessarily have to think about living in a foreign country. There are ways that you can develop very effective good works and actually live here. And that's not to say that that's the only way to do it. Living there there's situations where that's the best way to do it too. Okay, anyway, that's kind of some background thoughts. If you look in this book, Missionary Family Preparation. Family issues. Number one, being separated from family is something that really, really you need to be prepared for. The first time I went to India, I was there for about a month, and this was about 30 years ago. You could send a letter home, and it'd take 3 or 4 weeks for it to get back here. And so there's no way you could communicate with home writing a letter. You could make a phone call home, though. And so I was in Bangalore, India. I'd been there for 2 or 3 weeks, and I decided I was going to call home and talk to Janet. So you go to this little place where it's an office of the phone company, and you go in and tell them what you want to do, and they assign you to a little booth, and you go in there, and you give them your information, and they will connect you to home. And then they tell you you're going to need these little coins to drop over into this telephone to pay for your call. You pay for it as you go. And so I've got this gallon bucket of coins. And I'm thinking, boy, that's a lot of coins. They must be, I'm probably going to end up turning a bunch of these back in. And they said, now when you get on the phone and start talking, there'll be a little ding. And when there's a ding, you drop a coin in. Well, I got on the phone. I said, hello, ding, Janet, ding. every word. And I dropped that whole bucket of coins in, and about all I said was, I'm still alive. And I hope you are. And everyone there is. Now, it's better today, but in Myanmar, I think it still costs about $7 a minute or something like that. Now, you can do email, and I don't know if you can text. Can you text, Justin? Skype. Oh. Okay, so communication is getting a little bit better, but all right, it's gotten a whole lot better. But there's going to be separation, and now if you move there, you've got your wife with you, your husband with you. But Randy can probably tell you about this. Randy's home to bury his mother. And he hasn't seen his mother every month for the last 2 years like most of us get to do, or every week or whatever. If he couldn't handle separation, he couldn't do what he does. And you have to deal with those things. And sometimes you don't get to come home and bury relatives. You can't even make that trip home, get back here. And so you've got to be prepared to deal with that kind of thing if you're going to work in the mission field. I help the church some over in the state of Hawaii. I've been traveling through Hawaii for over 30 years working for the U.S. government. So I know most of the churches in that state. And for about 10 years, they've talked to me about helping them get a school started there. And fortunately, I think we're going to be able to get a school started there called Heritage Christian University. We're going to have an extension there. And that's because of what's happened in the last few months here into school. But anyway, the leaders there, I know them, and they tell me that when a preacher's job comes open in Hawaii, that they usually have to come over here to find candidates for that job. And they want to interview 2 or 3 people. They'll get the usual 50 resumes, and they sort through them and get it down to 3 or 4 people they want to interview. Well, each one of those that they bring over and interview, it costs them $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 to do that. So if they interview, say, 4 people, they've got $30,000 before they even get started. And then they select a man and they move him over there, and that costs them about $15,000 or $20,000 to just get him moved over there. And he signs a 5-year contract to stay there for 5 years. And I bet you if I were to ask, especially maybe a good percentage of the people in here, if you'd like to have a preaching job in Hawaii, you'd say, man, wouldn't I? That would be great. Well, do you know what happens to those guys that go over there for those 5-year contracts, living in paradise? After about 2 years, they say, I don't care if I have to go to court, I'm going home. And they move home and pay their own moving expenses to come back home. They've got it in their contract that they can be moved back over here, but they don't worry about that. Why? They can't stand. I mean, you're over there. You're thousands of miles away from family. You can talk to them on the phone, but if you're going to see them, it's going to cost you thousands of dollars to make a trip back, a family. And so they can't take it. They can't handle it. So the separation part of mission work in many, many different ways is something that very few people anticipate. And to be isolated the way that you are is a very hard thing, and it's even hard on shorter term situations too, where you go for maybe a month at a time, or even 2 or 3 weeks at a time, depending on your family and your family's situation. So You got to find ways to cope with that. If you're going to live in a foreign country, you've got to worry about education if you have children. You've got to worry about health issues. Neil's dad right now in the Philippines. Neil's dad is suffering with kidney stones. And he's got a kidney stone that's about that big around in one of his kidneys. Can you imagine the pain that he's going through on that? And he's been fighting this for 3 or 4 years, and he's tried to dissolve it. They've tried to vibrate it and break it up in little pieces and all kinds of things to get rid of that stone, and they can't get rid of it. And nothing's worked real well so far. And there's one sure way to get it out. You can cut him open. You have to cut about halfway around your body and cut that kidney open, and you'll probably lose that kidney, but at least you won't have an infection somewhere down the road because that stone's in there and die of infection. But if you could go to the hospital in Cebu, Philippines, and are cut open like that, there's a good chance you won't live through that surgery. There's a good chance you won't make it, you see. So that's why his dad puts it off and fears and dreads it, because it could be the end of his life. In many, many places in the world, I remember one time when Jamie in Burma had an ear infection, and it was bad. He was hurting. That's our oldest son. We were there in Yangon, and we were at the 8 Mile congregation Joey was talking about there with the family, and Jamie's just in misery, and one of the women there said, well, I'm going to take you down here to the clinic. And so we went with Jamie down there to the clinic, and the doctor came in there, and she had a magnifying glass and a candle. She held that candle up there where she could get a little bit of light down in his ear, and got that magnifying glass up there, and she says, I think I see what I can do. And then she took a coat hanger and straightened it out. And she says, I think I can puncture this abscess in there and relieve pressure, and your ear will quit hurting. And Jamie says, well, I don't know. He didn't let her do that. Well, and wisely, because there are many, many people in Burma who have one ear they can't hear off, because the whole chamber in there has rotted out with infection, you see. Well, it's a different world. It's a different world. We just don't really understand how different most of the rest of the world is compared to what we're accustomed to. So if you're going to involve your family, first of all, if you're going to take them with you, you're going to face that. If you're going to travel and they know anything about the rest of the world, they're going to be anxious about the fact that you're in all of that. So that has to be dealt with. You have to be able to handle that, to cope with that. But there are ways to get help. If you get in trouble, you can go to the American Embassy. There are a lot of resources we can turn to there. There are usually international schools in foreign countries. You sometimes have access to Western doctors. If you'll pay enough money, you can get to them. You can get to all kinds of help agencies for foreigners in many countries if you've got the money to do that. So you can cope with all of these things, but you need to know where they are and what they cost and what the requirements for access are. And so that's part of the preparation. You just can't go into it blindly. You've got to do a lot of research, and you've got to look very deeply, and you've got to be well prepared in every way. You've got to be able to teach in the environment you're going to be in, live in that environment, and you've got to be able to deal with problems when they come up. And of course, problem solving is the same anywhere in the world. You go through all the same steps. You need to know how to do that. You need to have the wisdom to know how to calmly address problems. Robin Dunaway and I last year we were traveling from India to Sri Lanka, and I forgot the exact. We flew from Bangalore, India to Madras, and then we were going to change planes in Madras and go on over to Colombo, Sri Lanka. And we were on two different airlines, and the airline that we flew into Madras on was late. The flight was late. We missed the next flight. Neither airline accepted responsibility for us missing our flight. We were only going to be in Sri Lanka 36 hours, but we had a pretty important mission to carry out in Sri Lanka. And they were trying to move us out 2 days to make the trip, which meant we wouldn't make it all. And then we were doing an international connection to get back. We actually on our way home. And here we are sitting at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning in an airport in Madras, India, with mosquitoes eating us up, 115 degrees, and couldn't see any way that we were going to maybe even get home, let alone make our next connection. Well, fortunately, Robin has a cool head. But anyway, that's the time when you don't need to get excited. You need to be able to think, and you need to be able to do problem solving and analysis. And we worked our way through it and spent a little money. We thought we were going to have to spend $1,000 a piece to get back on schedule, and I don't think we spent $100. I don't know. Anyway, and flew on first class to the next place. But anyway, you have to be able to do some things that you don't think about doing. You got to be cool, and you got to be able to analyze and to think. And of course, your family is back home, and you don't get to where you're supposed to be, and they don't know where you are or what's happened, and they hear about plane crashes here and there, and so you've got to be able to handle those kinds of things. You got to be able to deal with it. Prevention is the best method of problem management. Thinking ahead is always the best approach. And as you go, have contingent plans. I remember the first time I went to Colombo, Sri Lanka, and just a few months before, about 3 months before I was there, the community that I was in had been raided by the Army. And they came through this community, and these were relatively well-off people that lived in this community. The Sri Lankan Army went from house to house, machine gunning through the windows of the houses, and killed a whole lot of people. And people were just terrorized by the military for months. And I arrived in Sri Lanka, and a home that had been just almost destroyed by that. And when it came time to go to bed the first night, the head of the household, the man, took me to a bedroom. It was a 4-story house, great big house. He took me to a bedroom on the first floor of the house. It had a little twin bed there, and he said, "This is going to be your bed and a place to sleep." And he said, "Now, if you hear some noises like gunfire or loud noises," he said, "you get out of that bed, you get your clothes on as fast as you can." And then he reached down and he pulled the rug off the floor, and there's a trap door there. And there's a tunnel that you go down in. You go down that tunnel, and it comes out about 150 feet away from the house in a back alley back there. And he said, "You get in that tunnel and you go," and said, "You can't go wrong. You won't see a thing, but you just go until you come out, until you hit something and come out the other end." And said, "And you go fast, because everybody else here is going to be right behind you. But said, we're going to let you go first, you see." That's a little bit unnerving to think about that. The first time I went to Burma, one of the first things that the local people did with me is they went over the strategy that they would use to get me out of the country if there was a collapse of the government there. And I would actually go to a house, and they'd move me from one house to another, and they'd work me to to the border with Thailand to get me out of the country, to an underground. They had an underground railroad, you might say, to get people out, and they had to use it sometimes. And it amazed me that those people would die. They would die saving us. They'd be willing to give their life to save us in that situation. Well, hopefully we won't have to do that very often, but you may have to encounter that. You've got to be able to handle that, and your family needs to be able to handle it, and to know what you're doing, and to know the risks that you're taking. Read this book. There's another section in another course, you might say, the role of a missionary wife, which my wife wrote most of this. And it's actually a whole lot better than what I've just told you. It has a lot of things that women deal with, and the role of a missionary wife, and the skills that they need, and the way that they problem solve. And most of the time they have a lot cooler heads than we do. And they do a lot better job of thinking ahead than we do. And if your wife's with you, then that's an asset in every way. But if she's not, she needs to know that you're doing a good job of taking care of yourself too. I'll stop there. We'll have some questions with the panel, I think. Ed's going to.
Yeah, we're going to. All right, well, we'll go ahead with the panel. We'll start off, I guess, with over here with Roger, since we just heard from Wayne, and talk to Roger and Teddy. And Roger, would you just sort of briefly give us your background in mission work and where you work and what kind of things you do?
All right. Is this on or?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, I'll talk like this.
All right.
Excuse me, I'm Roger Copeland. It's my wife, Teddy. We were students at Freed-Hardeman back in the 70s. When we were seniors at Freed-Hardeman in 1976, we got involved with a group of about 4 other families, or 6 other families at the time, to do mission work somewhere in the world. We decided on Brazil. We prepared for 5 years to go to Brazil. Left for Brazil in 1981, lived there for till 1987. Went back on campaigns in 88, 90, 98, 2000, 2002. 3 of our 4 children were born in Brazil, in Fortaleza. That's where we met Randy Short and his wife. Back then, Brazil had about 8 or 10 different mission teams with 4 or 5 families each that were in different cities in Brazil. So, is that basically?
Okay. And are you based there now?
No, I'm in Florence, Alabama.
Okay, yeah, okay. And I guess we just heard from Wayne about basically the type of work you are involved with, which is still, ongoing, that kind of thing, involved in several different countries through these field agents especially. Maybe Janet, with regard to the mission work that you and Wayne do, how do you see your role, or what is sort of the most important thing that you do as a part of that work? What is your role within that work?
I usually
Answering emails, I know, but yeah.
Right. I usually do whatever Wayne tells me to do, mostly. But I do a whole lot of the communication with people. When I'm here in the States, I communicate with all the people overseas. And we have about 10 schools, and so I coordinate, like who's going over to teach and what they're teaching and things like that. And I ask Wayne a whole lot of questions, but I mostly do the typing and don't do a whole lot of thinking on that. But I think the main thing to do is to support your husband. And it's very important a lot of times in the foreign fields to be quiet. Women in other cultures do not have, I guess, what we have here, where we're free to, if we're in a group of men and women, to speak up and talk about things. you know. And so I try to pay attention, and then I discuss with Wayne when we get back if I see a problem or something that's going on, and ask him what to do about it.
Just say, Janet, Wayne described how he got involved in mission work. When did you start going on these trips with
Okay.
him?
I can't remember exactly. He went on several at the
He
beginning.
preceded
and
you.
then I stayed
Yeah.
here with children, okay, because they were all small.
Yeah.
And then when it got to the point that someone would keep 4 kids, then I went with him.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. And Teddy, would you also address sort of the same issues as far as what do you see as your most important role as a missionary in the mission work that you do? And also, you know, Roger described how he got involved in mission work, and at what point did you start going to the foreign fields and things?
Well, of course, we did different from the barriers in that we moved as a family and lived on the field for 6 years. So I knew before I married Roger that that's what he wanted to do. So I knew what I was getting into, I guess you'd say. But I would echo what Janet said in that I think the most important thing that I did as a missionary was to be a wife and support my husband and raise our children. The same thing I would have done and did do later on here in the States. That was my first role. And that's not to say that, you know, I wasn't involved in helping plant a church, and that's what we did because we went to a city where there had not been any work done by the Church of Christ. And of course you're going to be involved in that aspect of it, but the main thing I think is being a wife and a mother first.
So is this a fair characterization that if you were in the States, you would have been, in a way, a preacher's wife, but as it was, you were in a foreign field and you were essentially a preacher's wife there as well? I mean,
Right.
that was similar roles, just different locations. We do have a fifth member of the panel that, yeah, Randy Short, sorry to omit you at the beginning.
That's okay.
So let's start with you then. What sort of work have you been involved with in mission work? Can you describe your approach to missions and what you've done over the course of your mission career?
Well, my family arrived in Brazil a year before Roger and Teddy, in the same region of Brazil, northeast region, about 12 hours to the south of them, but we, as he mentioned, we did get to know them back then. And we were the first team of missionaries to go. Well, that's not exactly true. There was one that went back in the 20s, which is an interesting story, but in modern times anyway, we were the first team to go to the northeast region of Brazil. And I'm still there. I
Okay.
came back for 8 years. We were there 10 years the first time. We came back for 8, and we went back in '98, and we've been back there ever since. So,
And when you say we, you were referring
my wife,
to,
my family, yeah.
and are they in Brazil at the moment? Or?
Well, my wife is in the States with me, but she's taking care of some grandchildren right now, so she couldn't come tonight. But our children, we have 3 children. They're all back here in the States. We have 5 grandchildren. They're all back here in the States. Talking about separation now, you know, it's starting to hurt. And we got 2 more grandchildren on the way, so it's going to hurt a little more when they arrive, you know, with 7. But it's just Kathy and I down there now.
Okay. Well, since Kathy's not here with us, you'll have to sort of serve as her proxy. So as I asked Janet and Teddy what they saw as their main role in the mission field, how do you think Kathy would answer that
I
question?
think she saw that the same thing that they said. Now, one of the things that we learned right away was the little phrase, maybe you've heard it before, you know, if mama ain't happy, nobody ain't happy. So the men were taught on our team to make sure that the wives are happy, get them settled in well, and where they can do what they're there to do, which is take care of us and the kids and be involved as well in the work. But the main thing is take care of us and the kids.
If we come back down to Janet and Wayne, and I'd like to talk about your children and how you incorporated them into the work and how you thought about that. And of course, as we've already heard, you all have different, I guess, techniques or ways of going about doing mission work, from short trips to more long-term. And so for you, the 4 children that you've had, how did you go about incorporating them into the work, or thinking about going and leaving them at home versus taking them along? How did you make those sort of decisions, and how did that come about?
Well, we always prayed that our children would want to do mission work. That's one thing. But what we did was, as they reached their teens, I started taking them with me, one or two at a time, and they would go with me for a trip, usually just a couple of weeks. And I tried to make it easy for them. I would say, just, be with me, and I'll probably be doing a lot of speaking and teaching. You're not going to be called on to speak. You're not going to be called on to do any kind of heavy lifting things. Enjoy it. Enjoy what you're going to see, and have fun, as Joey said. But they were always the photographer. They took the pictures and did those kinds of things. And as they grew up, they all made lots of trips. All of the kids made trips all through their teen years and into their early adult years. We didn't push any of our children toward going through a Bible degree program or anything. We let them choose what they wanted to study. And none of them, I don't think any of them got a Bible degree in their first degree. Jeremy was math and science, and Joey's got a degree in secondary education, and Jeannie's human resource management, and Jamie's finance and banking, I believe. And but as they went through school and graduated and started thinking about the rest of their life, all of our children would come and say, I want to be involved in mission work. That's really what I want to do with my life. And so Joey went back to school, and he's been going to school for 37 years.
I think he's done now.
He just graduated. Anyway, they went back and did studies in Bible, and Jeremy and Joey both have gotten graduate degrees, and I guess what I'm saying is we didn't push them, but we prayed and we encouraged, and they're doing with their children the same thing. And I really think if they see you doing it and enjoying it, and if it's a genuine thing, that's your best shot at them being involved, if that's what you want, and that's what we wanted.
Do you have anything to add to that, Janet?
Just one thing, it's really Wayne's story, but the first time Jamie went, he told him, all you have to do is be the photographer, and just watch and observe. But when Brother Swami in South India saw 2 men, he said, Brother Jamie is going to be preaching our first lesson tonight, and it was about 300 people in the audience, and Jamie said, what am I going to do? And Wayne just handed him his Bible and his notes, and he preached. So that's another thing with mission work. You may think you're going to do one thing. I know John Lucius knows this, but you end up doing something else, and everyone works.
Well, Roger and Teddy, would you address sort of the similar thing from your own perspective, as far as how is it like raising kids on the mission field in Brazil? What particular challenges did you see in Brazil versus America, and how did you go about maybe incorporating them into the work? Was it different being on a mission field as opposed to being, let's say, a located preacher in the States in terms of your children?
I was never a located preacher in the States, so I've always wanted to be a missionary. I didn't necessarily want to be a preacher. Having said all of that, I enjoyed being a missionary. When we went to Brazil in 1981, we thought Teddy was 7 months pregnant with our second child. She was 8 months pregnant with our second child. And a month to the day after we landed on the field, she gave birth to Luke. We went to the hospital in a friend's car who had a gun in the glove compartment and said, we don't go anywhere at night without a gun in our car. Did not speak Portuguese at the time, and it was a harrowing experience. But we went to a private hospital. We had private insurance the whole time we were there. I will echo the preparation part. Part of what we prepared in the 5 years, I went to Harding Graduate School, got a master's degree in missions. We studied different techniques for doing mission work, studied about groups of people that had been to Brazil. Getting back to our children, as you can probably tell, 3 of the 4 were born there. We lived there till 87, so the oldest one when we left was about 6 years old. They got out and played soccer in the streets. They got to meet friends, neighbors, things like that. They picked up the language a lot quicker than we did. Would you say that's true? We spoke Portuguese fluently by the time we left, but our children could speak it in the vernacular probably within 6 months to a year of being there. Our daughter, that's now 30. When we came, she was 5 years old when we came back from Brazil. She spoke only Portuguese, did not speak any English, and within a month, she did not speak Portuguese. And today, I don't know how much Portuguese she would speak. Incorporating them in the work, every one of them have been back on campaigns. When I mentioned we went back in 98, 2000, 2002, the first 3 that graduated from high school, they all graduated from Mars Hill. We took them back on a campaign with a group from Texas that was going down to Fortaleza, the city where we lived, for 6 years, and we went on 2-week campaigns back to Brazil, to the city where we lived. We started the work, as Teddy said, from scratch. When we left in 87, there was a congregation of about 300 members in attendance in the main downtown church. And that congregation still exists today. There are no Americans I don't think there's any Americans that are still working there. None of the original 5 or 6. So we would go back on campaigns and help them speak. I will tell a language story real quick that I tell all the time. When I got to Brazil in 81, we had all of our stuff. We were moving in. I needed to get a van to rent to move stuff from the port to the house. The word for truck in Portuguese is caminhão. So I wanted to go and ask for a caminhão, but I asked for a camarão.
Was it good?
Yeah, it was good. A camarão is a large shrimp. So I went to the store and asked to rent a large shrimp to move my stuff, and they just laughed at me and thought he's a crazy American. But anyway, you just make mistakes like that, but you assimilate into the culture, you try to do the best you can and just meet people, understand what you're doing. I would recommend teamwork. That's what we did. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to, but it's a lot more comfortable if you go with people that you know and are friends with, and then you have a support group. I missed my sister's wedding because we were in Brazil and I could not get back. I missed my grandmother's funeral because we were in Brazil and I could not get back. And we were able to come back, for furloughs, but these events took place at times where we just couldn't get back.
Teddy, do you have anything to say about raising kids on the mission field and incorporating kids into the work? Or?
Well, I'll just say that our experience in Brazil, I think, is one of the greatest things that we ever did. We thank God constantly that we were able to be a part of that, and I think it's really made a difference, not only in us as a couple, but in our kids, because even though they were very young, that's just always been a part of our history, and I think that they've always really been proud of that, and especially since they were able to go back when they were older and see the church and see the people that, that they vaguely remembered but they'd heard so much about. And, there's that passage that in the New Testament that talks about, if you make those sacrifices and leave home and family, that you'll be blessed 100-fold, and I think that's a special promise for missionaries.
Yeah. Brother Short, what can you say about your kids on the mission field and the same aspects?
Well, really, I think it was such a blessing to raise children in Brazil. We had one child that was born in Brazil. We went with 2 boys, and they were so young as far as preparation to take them there. There wasn't much we could do. You know, they were let's see, 4 and 1, and 1 and 4 years old. So, and then Amanda was born there. Of the 3 today, neither one of my boys want to be preacher or missionary, but they support our work so much in Brazil. They back us 100% in what we're doing still today. And Amanda is the one, our youngest, who was born in Brazil, who would love to be in Brazil, okay? But her husband would not love to be in Brazil. He's a youth minister, Joey, but he's not a missionary. Joey got to meet Anthony, because Anthony, our middle son, because he came down for the World Cup and we went to some games together. So I think it was a real blessing. And after we were there for 10 years, we decided to come back because I thought it would be good for our boys to finish high school here in the States. If I had it to do over again, I would not have done that. I would have stayed. I would, just right through the whole 34 years. Instead, we came back for 8 years. They did graduate and start college. And actually, our plan was even that Amanda, our youngest, would put her into college, and then maybe we would go back to Brazil. And she heard us talking about that one day, and she said, "No, I want to go back as well." And so her last 2 years of school was when we went back, and she finished, and then came back for college and met her husband at college. And so her plans for being a missionary in Brazil didn't work out exactly, but it was a real blessing. One of the things that I'll say, I think our kids have different values, material values, spiritual values as well, but when it comes to material things, one of the things that they had a hard time with when they were back here. Now, when we were back here that 8 years and they were with us, it wasn't so bad. But when my children went away to college and saw how some of the other, of their college friends and everything lived, and the materialism, they were really shocked by that and had a hard time with that. So that's another one of the reasons I wish I had stayed on a little bit. And that doesn't have to be true, but that's what happened.
Do you think, as you look back on that experience of your kids, could you have done anything different to, I guess, prepare them for that, or did it work out okay?
You mean while we were back here?
Yeah.
It was probably could have done something, but I didn't know that it was going to be necessary, and so it was a bit of a shock, I guess.
Yeah. That's interesting.
But I mean, they have gotten over it. And now they prefer to live. They love to visit us in Brazil, and they do, which also helps with the separation bit since they come to see us a lot and bring the grandkids down. But they don't desire to live there. The 2 boys do not. But Amanda would love to be living and working right side by side with us today.
Yeah. Keep the mic for just a moment, and
Okay.
let's shift gears from kids to finances.
Okay.
And talk about, if you would, how you handle your personal finances on the mission field, and what challenges you see there, differences, or things we ought to think about.
What can I say about that? When we first went to Brazil, things were very cheap down there, but you have to have enough, and we had gone with very, very little. We thought it was enough, but we found out after the first year we were there that we didn't have enough. So we had to raise some additional funds, but we were fortunate. We've always been fortunate raising funds and having enough funds. But that is something you really have to be careful about. There are people that leave the mission field who went to stay for years and years because they really didn't go prepared financially. But we've had good congregations. We have good relationship with congregations that we've worked with, and they've come through for us when we've had needs come up.
Yeah. Roger, Teddy, do y'all have anything to?
We had 2 supporting congregations while we were in Brazil the whole time we were there. One was Mount Zion out here in Florence that handled our working fund, and the other one was Hickson out of Chattanooga, Tennessee that handled our salary. We were fortunate enough that we had that's all we needed. We did not have to raise any more funds. As Randy said, the dollar was very strong when we first got to Brazil. I rented a house. It was 3 bedrooms, a couple of bathrooms, had a side house for about $300 US at the beginning of the year. Because inflation was the way it was in Brazil, by the time December came, I was paying $100 for that same house and the same amount of Brazilian currency. And then we were fortunate in the years we were there, the dollar was strong. I was able to save money and put it in some mutual funds and stuff over here in the States and do things like that was able to help later on. We had a friend that changed the money for us in Brazil, and we were able to take advantage of the strong dollar. So, it was pretty good, but the Brazilians suffered a lot. In Brazil, it was either, and it is in a lot of countries, very rich or very poor. I'm sure where you all go, it's probably the same thing. And, that's just the way of life. A lot of Brazilians did not have cars, did not have, some had telephones, now they all have cell phones. Most had television sets, had electricity, but it was a very rich, very poor situation.
Do you have anything to say about, like, I don't know which one of you it was that was primarily responsible for the personal finances and running the checkbook, I suppose, and that kind of thing, and did that?
Let me say this. In Brazil, if you wanted to go to the bank, you needed to get there early because there were long lines to pay bills, to get cash, whatever. Now, sometimes because we were Americans, they would let us in before hours to do our business. Other times, the 5 missionaries that were together, we hired an office boy that went and paid our bills for us. That was a member of the congregation there. And, shop in the grocery store, sometimes, later on, what did the inflation get at times? 1,000%?
1,000 a year.
1,000% a year was inflation. Now, we don't relate to that over here. What's inflation now? 2%? And if it gets up to 5 or 6, we're about ready to panic. But in Brazil, one time in Brazil, they had knocked off 3 zeros off the currency overnight. If you had a $100,000 Cruzeiro, whatever it was called, and it was 1,000,000, the next day it was 100, just overnight. And that's what happened a lot of times.
Prices were readjusted as well, but of course, they almost had to do that because it would get to where when you went to the grocery store, you'd have to carry a wheelbarrow full of money, to pay for the groceries you were buying because, that 10,000 Cruzeiros, he said right there, may sound like a lot of money, but it may have been just a few dollars.
What did that do as far as your fundraising in American dollars, and how did that relate to the inflation?
We were paid the same amount in American dollars, and as long as the dollar was strong, we were okay.
You just needed to keep your money in American dollars for as long as possible.
Yeah, and what we did, we would keep it in change maybe once every month, and it would get deposited into our account in Brazil in the funds. We wouldn't change necessarily. If I don't know how much I got back then. Let's say I got $2,000 a month in U.S. currency. I would use maybe 1,000 and keep the 1,000 in the American bank over here. I wouldn't change everything. And if I needed more, I'd do that. But you kind of had to watch and see what was going on and make sure you did it. And I will also say, those of you that are thinking about doing mission work, you are going to be rich. If you go to Brazil or wherever you go, because you're American, you are wealthy. And you may not be wealthy, but to them, you are wealthy. And there will always be people coming up having a great idea for you to invest in their idea. And if you'll just give them a couple $1,000s, you'll make, am I wrong? And you've got to be careful, but I may be jumping ahead. You may not be thinking about that right now, but just practical experience.
Wayne and Janet, from your perspective, what can you say about personal finances and running your budget as missionaries?
Our situation's very, very different. We've never lived there. We travel back and forth, so our all of our budget was here as far as our personal finances are concerned. I was very fortunate. I worked for the federal government. I had lots of time off. I was actually responsible for an international program, so I had to travel for the government anyway. And so we didn't need support. We were self-supporting. We raised money to pay for the things that we do. Now, Janet mentioned we operate 10 Bible colleges. We have 30 people who direct campaigns that reach millions of people every year. We see 3,000 to 4,000 baptisms a year in what we're doing. So it's a big work that we have, and we raise the money for that. So I'm visiting congregations every time I can get in. I'm visiting somewhere. I visit about 120 congregations a year. About 100 congregations put money into our work every year. We spend $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 a year doing what we do. That's an entirely different experience, I guess you'd say, than a lot of kind of classical mission efforts. But it's an effective work. It's a work that's reaching a lot of people. It's a work that's developing the church. It's expanding the borders of the kingdom. And you may find you don't know how the Lord's going to position you, what the Lord's going to do with you. And you need to stay open to that. We tried, as a matter of fact, the first place that we looked at trying to do mission work was Brazil. I tried desperately to get a job with Gulf Oil Company in 1972. I tried to get a job with Hess Oil Company so that I could move to Brazil, because there was a lot of activity in the early 70s down that way. I struck out every way I went. Now, the Lord had a different path in mind for me. He had a different work in mind for me and for us. And so if you pursue His kingdom and serving in His kingdom and go through the doors that open, the Lord may take you a different way than you think you're going to go. But He will be with you. He will take care of you. I retired from my government job in 2000. I thought that I had enough money in my 401k and my pension to take care of me, take care of us the rest of our life. And then on September the 11th, 2001, the World Trade Center was blown up, and the stock market crashed, and my retirement fund went with it. And all of a sudden, I don't have enough money for retirement. I got a call from Washington, D.C., from some people I'd worked with when I was in government. They wanted me to come back in as a consultant. And I got paid more working as a consultant the next 8 years than I made in my entire career. What am I saying? The Lord, He took care of me. He gave it back to me, you see. I never dreamed it would be that way. So we've always had what we've needed. We're just like anybody else. I went on trips in the 80s and 90s, and Janet was paying the bills at home. And if I ever did get a communication from her, it was, we don't have enough money to pay such and such a bill or whatever, or this came up or whatever. And you juggle just like everybody else. We've never had less than we need. We've never had more than we need. It's always just been what we need. And I think the Lord has a hand in that. You have to think ahead. You have to be playing ahead. I can't imagine these guys down there looking at 1,000% inflation, and what that would do to you. And the dollar isn't always strong.
Yeah, that's true.
The dollar sometimes gets weak. It has nothing to do with logic. There's nothing logical about it. You can be in the mission field, and all of a sudden that $2,000 a month that you're getting and was paying for everything won't pay for a fourth of what you've got. And I've run into lots of missionaries. I've actually hauled lots of dollars across the oceans to people located in the field who were in that position because they were struggling to feed their families. So You have to plan ahead and be ready to deal with adversity if it does come. But I believe the Lord will provide even then.
Randy lived through when the dollar was weak in Brazil.
Well, as a matter of fact, it's not all that strong right now. Yeah, we went through a period. Now, this is one of the interesting things, after your church gets used to you living in a society, the dollar's always going up in value, and the dollar beats inflation a little bit, and so you're always a little bit ahead of the inflation, even though it's 1,000% a year. And then all of a sudden, it goes the other direction, and churches sometimes have a hard time talking about that. We have a school as well in Recife, and that was happening to us there, and it was getting harder and harder for the school to keep its bills paid. And I was communicating with I have great elders, but sometimes things are just hard to communicate. And so things are getting pretty bad, and I was telling them, every month, it's just things are really tight here. I'm going to have some help and everything. And then some missionary in Brazil, down in the southern part of Brazil, that I hardly knew. You guys may have heard of him. I won't say his name now, but he did this little report that was published, okay? And they got a hold of it, and they read his report about it, and all of a sudden the lights came on. And I thought, guys, I've been telling you this, for like the last 3 months, and you guys haven't been listening to me. But, they finally did come up with it, and so they didn't increase my salary, but they started helping us get the bills for the school paid for anyway. So.
In just a moment, I'll ask if any of you have any questions, so be thinking about something you might want to ask our panel. Let me ask Janet and Teddy, from your perspective as women involved in mission work, what is the most important skill that you think you have, or that you think women ought to bring to the mission work that you've been involved in?
Could I answer that with my wife as well?
Yeah, sure. Let's go back to Randy. Okay.
Okay. Well, I think I always say when someone says, well, what do you need to be able to do, or what skill do you need? And I think if you like to camp as a woman, you probably could handle mission work. If you don't like it, you don't like bugs, you don't like the heat, you don't like any of this, you're not going to make it over there. Also, if you are one of the wives that has to stay home, while your husband is gone, you have to learn to be able to take care of yourself, and fix whatever breaks, take care of the car, or have somebody like Thomas who's down the road, and you call him, because as soon as your husband leaves, everything falls apart. Your car breaks, you have plumbing problems, whatever. So you have to learn to be able to handle all of that, while they're gone.
Okay. Camping and take care of yourself.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
But it's kind of causes a problem when they come back home, because you're used to running things, and then
Now they're
you
in
have
the
to
way.
kind of slowly step back and let them get back into their position.
Teddy.
Well, I think because we were on a team that I learned that with the guys as well as with the women, everybody has different talents and different strengths. And we didn't all do the same things, and that's good. If we'd had 5 guys who wanted to preach, we'd probably been in trouble, But it's a great opportunity to use your specific talent, and we saw that just worked great within our congregation, because we had different people that, focused on different things. Roger really didn't want to preach a lot down there, but we loved having people in our homes. And that was a great way to bring new Christians into the church and things like that. I'm a writer and enjoy writing, and so that was one talent that I was able to use. But I would say, and it's not exactly, I guess, a skill set, but I think the most important thing for a woman, for a man, for anybody on the mission field is make sure that you have your own relationship with God, because you can't do that through your husband, and you've got to have that if you're going to be able to teach and be an example to other people.
Thank you. Yeah, Randy.
Okay, and guys, if you're not married and thinking about going to the mission field, you might do what I did. I married a home economics major, from Freed Hardeman. So anyway, we met there at Freed Hardeman too. But cooking, do you remember how difficult it was? Because even though she was a home economics major, everything was based on how do you cook here in the United States and how do you do things here in the United States. So she gets there, and I mean, you can't go to the grocery store and pick up all these frozen vegetables and things like that. They don't have it. It's better actually. The food's much better because everything's fresh. But you kind of have to learn how to cook all over again. So I would say, and you can see I'm a pretty hefty guy, so Kathy's done a really good job at that. By the way, I just want to tell you folks, today is my 42nd wedding anniversary, and we're separated.
Yes. Thanks for spending it with us.